Okay, the attractions at the fair came in, many forms, but there were 14 great buildings. Some of those were the agricultural, manufacturing, mines and mining, which doesn't sound very exciting, but people were curious about all the things that were happening in the world there. Electricity, obviously one of the most popular, fisheries, forestry, a women's building, and transportation. All set into this little event. One of the biggest attractions here, and biggest, literally, and most exciting, was the very first Ferris wheel. This is something that you would have, in some ways, you kind of thought it might have been a thing well before this, but the steel manufacturing industry and electricity and all that had all kind of come together at this point to make this sort of thing possible. And it's quite the structure. So it is 264 feet tall, has 36 cars, so going around it here. And this isn't just the kind where two people sit on a little spot on a wheel that goes around at your county fair. This one is actually, each one of these little boxes holds 40 people each. So on the whole wheel, you're just under 1,500 people if it's fully loaded, which is quite the thing. Hugely popular. People really, even though it's kind of at the outer edge over here, people would you would imagine people would kind of keep around here, but people made their way out to this area to get to the Ferris wheel because it was just a thing to behold. Sadly, though, I think they did look to see if they could find a home for it after all this was over, but they never really did. And so it was dismantled. You can imagine that now, looking backwards, we, appreciate what they created. And somebody, Disney World or somebody would be willing to, house it, maybe build a little structure for it to keep it, keep the weather off of it. Who knows? But it's a bit sad that they had to, or they took it all apart and got rid of it. But I'm sure it was all steel, so it had some worth as scrap. But it was quite a thing, and it's going to have a very strong influence on the future of amusement parks. People see this as, oh wow, that's a really viable business option. Like I could create this thing, and then people will keep coming to see it or to ride it. So a roller coaster is neat, but it's for the business owner, it's really neat because people keep coming to pay money to get on it and go for a ride. And so the ideas for amusement parks are, boiling at this point. So Coney Island in New York is going to get its start, and the ideas from this are in that, and among many others throughout the U.S. But it's very, very influential. One other thing, I don't think I have a picture of it here, but since they were connected to the Columbus expedition as the namesake for this fair, they're also going to have replicas of the three ships, the Nina the Pinta and the Santa Maria. I think I always get those backwards. And they were there at the fair. People could go and see them and feel appreciation for that connection as well. For my money, the most impressive thing. Oh, here's a couple of other realistic pictures. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had this one. I forgot I had this in here. So some actual photographs, and it's fun because in these more casual photos, you also see, how the people were dressed and what was, how they were, just getting around, wandering, and everything. So that's pretty neat to see. But this, to me, is one of the neat things that they created. Kind of unnecessary in a lot of ways, but it would have been, for a lot of the people, one of the first things they saw, and they would have been blown away by it immediately. So this is a moving walkway. The giant pier that goes out into the, jump back, right down here at the very bottom, there's a long pier that was built to go out into the water, and then these steamships could pull up alongside. See, there's one there, and you could fit several because this is a very long pier. And people could disembark, and then they could hop on this moving walkway, and it would take them right to the fairground where they could get off here and move on their way into it. So moving walkways aren't uncommon in our world. You can go to the airport and get on the little moving walkway and and put along there and eventually get to the next section where your flight's going to be. But this was new, and so you can see, the length of it here with the ship scale there, but here, well, here you get to see the shape of it. We'll go round and then back up that way, and then this gives you a little bit better sense of the arrangement. So people could sit in these sort of moving benches, or they could stand on the sides and ride that way. And so they could just hop off their boat and get on a bench and all the way around and get off down here, and off they go to the fair. It's just an amazing thing that they had there in 1893, that they had made all this work and come together and not kill anybody. So it's just a really kind of a neat thing to see. If I could go back and see anything at the fair, I think that would be what I would choose. I'll get to the Idaho building here in a second. I meant to mention some of the things that you might have in your pantry currently that debuted at this particular fair. One is juicy fruit gum. That's one. Cream of wheat. You might have a box of that in your house. Pabst Blue Ribbon beer is one. Aunt Jemima pancake mix and Quaker oats. So I'm sure you've tried at least one of those at some point, and all those got debuted here. The Idaho building here was quite popular among a lot of the people who, the West has a certain fascination, so people looked to the West and were excited about the things that came out of the West. And so Idaho decided to build a log construction building, and it really stood out at the fair because everything was white or glass or gleaming, and then they come out with this, and people really like it. It was surprisingly popular among all of the other buildings. I don't know if it's just because it was different or people had never seen anything like it who hadn't been west, but people were quite excited about it. Very popular with city dwellers, I suppose, as a novelty. So countries and states, 46 countries decide to put on exhibits there, much as they had done since the exhibit in London. They were doing so here to promote, their country and their wares. One even was the Norway sent a Viking ship, and they didn't just send it; they sailed it there. So a bunch of hardy folks from Norway, they built the boat, and then they got in it, and they sailed it all the way to Chicago, which is a feat unto itself. I've linked a video below. It's not the best video in the world, but it kind of describes the process of creating the boat, how it got created, and then how it actually got there and where it ended up today. So it's a pretty interesting story. So check out that video if you're interested in the Viking ship here. It's quite a thing. So a lot of U.S. states also have their own exhibits: Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Utah. A lot, some territories that weren't states yet had pavilions as well. The women's building was unique in its focus because it was dedicated to communication. They had a lecture hall in it so that speakers could come on a regular basis throughout the time that the fair was happening. They even had a library with 7,000 books in it that were all written by women. So that was a unique thing that they decided to have there at the fair. And inventions by women as well were on exhibit. So it's neat that they had that in 1893. This is well before the suffrage was hitting its stride and getting ready to be passed in the United States. The Guns and Artillery building was quite popular, just as a neat thing to see these massive armaments. And this is before, remember, well before World War I here. This was by the German manufacturer Krupp, put up the money for this to happen. And so you would see their logo around in this area a lot. These were a lot of coastal guns, breech-loaded guns, just this massive weaponry that had like a range of 15 miles. In the horticulture building, which is one of the prettier buildings that they have with this dome structure. You can see the landscaping that they put together. You know, people at this time wouldn't have been had a lot of experience with, say, a cactus. You know, this part of the world understands the cactus a bit better and further west, but you know, this would have been new to folks in Chicago or people traveling to Chicago, and so they would have been excited by that. I believe that's a stand of Devil's Walking Stick right there, if I'm not mistaken. So that's interesting that they transported that into this area. But lots of exotic plants. One that people loved a lot also was the collection of orchids. That was a big deal. And I was going to read this just as a pick to pick a sort of a random one. This is the Fisheries and Animals Building, and I had a little excerpt here that kind of gives you a little sense of what was happening with them. So, occupying the entire southern aisle is the collection from Ward's Natural Science Establishment of Rochester, New York, in the center of which is the Siberian mastodon, reproduced from the Royal Museum of Stuttgart, 16 feet high and with curved tusks. There he is. With curved tusks 6 feet in length. Among the remains of the mastodons taken from the ice near the mouth of the River Lena during the 18th century were portions of skin covered with long hair. Thus, with its skeleton reconstructed, scientists were enabled to clothe it here as represented in his natural state. Nearby is the huge frame of a Paleosaurus, 22 foot long, and the original of which was unearthed in English soil. The Ichthyosaurus, the Megatherium, the gigantic elk of Ireland, the wingless moa of New Zealand, the armadillo of Montevideo, and other evolutionary forms of bird and beast and fish. So they're really interested in like dinosaurs and ancient creatures as well. Suspended over the gallery ceiling is a skeleton of a whale, and elsewhere a huge octopus with arms outstretched as if to seize its prey. Other specimens are there, those of mammals and deer and elk and moose from the west, and all other things, sea creatures as well. So they're just trying to make it, very museum-like in a lot of ways. Very people, what would people be interested in seeing? And so reconstructed a woolly mammoth among many others. So lots of neat things to see. And this is all, more natural history kind of thing, but it's also exciting in just displaying art and music and just lots going on. And they had sort of a rotation, so there could be a schedule of like presenters or bands and things that people could come on a certain day to hear that particular band and also see things. So lots going on that's exciting. So I think I will leave it off there for this particular class. And if you can take the time as sort of your homework for the class and to add to your understanding, this is actual fairly significant documentary called The Expo, but it's all about the Chicago World's Fair, and it's actually narrated by Gene Wilder, who, if you know the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the first one, that's him, and among many, many other movies. But it's quite good and just has lots of great imagery that they've dug up. There's a little bit on the exposition by the channel Brain Scoop, which is also good. It's a shorter video there. A little bit here about the Viking ship arriving in Chicago and how that all played out. This is just an animation here of fireworks at the fair. It's nothing. It's not a actual video. It's just like a loop of what it would look like to see fireworks over the White City. And then this one is just sort of, if you're just interested and want to chill out to it, this would be a good one. It's basically if you took a walking tour like you do with cities today, take a walking tour of Chicago in 1893. What would that be like? Just to give you a sense of where Chicago was at the time and what was going on. So it kind of mixes historical photos or drawings with modern day photos because there's still things in the city that are from 1893, and so it's a neat balance of how this person went about doing that. So I thought that was quite good. So, but yeah, take some time, enjoy a little bit of the documentary here. I think it'll give you a good sense of the festivities and everything going on. So I'll catch you on Wednesday, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. All right, thanks.